She brought him up as if he were her blood, provided him with all she could, and his response was to abandon her completely. It happened on a Thursday evening, one of those uncertain days when the sunlight seemed undecided whether to linger or fade away early. Evelyn found herself standing on her front steps wearing bedroom slippers, clutching a cloth shopping bag containing fresh bread, several bean cans, and a warm rotisserie chicken wrapped in plastic. She leaned against her front entrance, her own entrance, and sensed something was amiss. Her key wouldn't work. She attempted it repeatedly, rotating it slowly, quickly, even flipping it around thinking perhaps her mind was playing tricks. But her hand wasn't the problem. The issue was the lock mechanism. Someone had replaced the deadbolt. She tapped once, then again, then more forcefully with her knuckles. Still gripping her shopping bag, still wrapped in her pale blue sweater that carried a hint of lavender fragrance. Still positioned where she had stood for 22 years. Then the entrance opened. Just slightly. Ryan's partner, Natalie, peered through the narrow opening, her eyebrows lifted as if she hadn't anticipated visitors. "Oh, hello. You weren't expected back so soon." Evelyn stared. "Why am I unable to enter my house?" Natalie paused. She glanced behind her, then stepped outside, closing the door completely. "I believe Ryan intended to discuss this with you." "Discuss what exactly?" "You no longer reside here." The silence dropped like a stone. Evelyn gripped her grocery bag more firmly. Suddenly uncertain about what to do with her arms, her chest constricted. "What did you just tell me?" Natalie offered a nervous smile. The type people display when they're acting like everything is fine. "Listen, it's merely administrative matters. Nothing against you personally. Ryan mentioned you had agreed to sign over the property title." "I agreed to what?" "He said you had signed several weeks back." "Do you recall all those papers on the dining table?" Evelyn gazed and gradually things began to make sense. The documents, the manner Ryan dismissed her inquiries, informed her it was simply routine maintenance, that we must organize things properly, that this would safeguard the property if something occurred to you. She had placed her faith in him, she had trusted her child, and now her hands were shaking. Natalie didn't linger for additional questions. She slipped back inside, mumbling something about contacting Ryan. The entrance closed once more, secured again. Evelyn remained there for a complete minute, then 5, then 10. Nobody reopened the door, and she refrained from knocking. She descended the stairs slowly, that chicken still cradled under her arm like an infant. She was uncertain of her destination, but she knew she wouldn't be returning inside. However, Ryan hadn't merely seized her house, he had taken something more profound. And Evelyn was about to recall precisely who she was. Long before any of this occurred, before the documentation, before Natalie, before her front steps became unfamiliar, Evelyn had been more than simply a woman in a residence. She had been a parent. And not just to anyone, to a child nobody else desired. Back in 1996, Evelyn was performing the overnight shift at St. Joseph's Medical Center in Jackson, Mississippi. She worked as a ward nurse, resilient, dependable, gentle-spoken, a woman who had long since accepted not bearing children of her own after 2 pregnancy losses and an unsuccessful round of fertility treatment. The sorrow was a mark, unseen, but profound. And then one evening, she encountered Ryan. He had arrived with a fractured wrist, barely 2 years of age, pallid, malnourished, dressed in a shirt 3 sizes too large with mustard spots on the neck. His foster parent didn't even remain at the medical facility, left him with Child Protective Services and departed. Evelyn hadn't sought to adopt. But sometimes the divine doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it simply places an infant in your embrace and challenges you to release him. Ryan remained silent for the initial few days. Simply held on to her uniform like ivy. Wouldn't communicate with anyone. Wouldn't consume food unless she provided it. Something about her created a sense of security for him, and that was sufficient. 2 months afterward, she submitted the first set of documents. 6 months later, he carried her family name. Her companions thought she had lost her mind. A single African American woman in her late 30s adopting a Caucasian toddler with behavioral difficulties. Girl, you attempting to rescue the entire system. No, just this particular one, she would respond. Evelyn provided Ryan with everything she had never possessed. A bedroom with an automobile-themed bed, prepared lunches with his name written in marker, swimming instruction, music lessons, Saturday excursions to the animal park. He suffered from respiratory issues. She located the finest pediatric specialist. Struggled with reading. She employed a private instructor. She demonstrated how to braid hair using his toy figures so he would understand how to care for a future daughter. She made him compose gratitude letters after Christmas. And she never once missed a parent-teacher meeting. But not everything was ideal. As Ryan matured, circumstances shifted. By middle school, he began questioning. Why do I appear different from you? Why do people observe us strangely in stores? Why does everyone assume I'm adopted? She always responded with identical words. Because you are, but that doesn't mean you aren't mine. He never completely embraced it. In high school, he became withdrawn. By college, he rarely returned home. And when he did, it was always brief. An overnight stay, a meal, a hello mama, before rushing away with his phone in his hand. However, Evelyn never protested. She maintained the lights on. Kept his former room exactly as he had left it. Kept believing that love, even silent love, was adequate. Then her spouse died. And suddenly Ryan began visiting more frequently. He was supportive initially, cleaning gutters, cutting grass, reminding her to take her blood pressure medication. He would bring Natalie occasionally, and they would sit on the porch while Evelyn prepared cornbread and watched quiz shows. She believed things were healing. But what she was unaware of was that Ryan hadn't come home to rebuild. He came to assess. And by the time she understood it, her name was removed from the deed, and her trust had been sold for nothing. But a mother doesn't forget. And Evelyn was already recalling every sacrifice she had ever made. Evelyn spent that evening in her vehicle. She parked it 2 blocks away from the house. Well, what previously was her house in front of a series of duplexes with chipping paint and plastic chairs on the porches. She didn't weep, not once. But her hands remained fixed at 10 and 2 on the steering wheel, even after the engine was turned off. The rotisserie chicken sat untouched in the passenger seat, cold now, grease seeping through the plastic. She stared through the windshield, her eyes focused on nothing. Grief has a method of settling heavily in your chest. Not simply from losing people, but from recognizing who they never were to begin with. When her husband Leonard died 3 years ago from a misdiagnosed blood clot, Evelyn thought the pain couldn't cut any deeper. He had been her stability, a man of limited words, all substance. They met at church, fell in love over fried catfish and Bible passages, and spent 29 years constructing a home that rested on faith and forgiveness. But this pain, this betrayal, it had a different sting. The following morning, Evelyn went to the bank to examine her account. Part routine, part necessity. It was almost amusing. The balance hadn't changed because Ryan never accessed that money, because Ryan never even knew it existed. After Leonard died, the hospital attempted to avoid responsibility. They claimed it was a natural complication. But Evelyn had been a nurse too long not to recognize the pattern. She pressed, filed complaints, consulted with an old attorney friend. And 2 years later, she won a malpractice lawsuit that no one thought she could. $9.5 million. She didn't inform a soul, not even Ryan. She moved it into a separate trust under her maiden name, split across several accounts. It wasn't out of paranoia. It was peace of mind, a secret, sacred thing. Because money changes people, and some things are better left under the radar. That day, sitting in the bank lobby with her ankles swollen and her spirit fractured in 2, Evelyn realized something else. Ryan didn't just betray her trust. He underestimated her. She might not have had the house anymore, but she had resources. She had knowledge. And she still had one weapon Ryan had never learned how to use: patience. So, she reserved a motel room in Meridian. Paid in cash. 2 nights. No questions. She needed a strategy. But more than that, she needed to sit quietly and remember who the hell she was. She browsed through an old notebook she kept in her purse full of prayers, phone numbers, and handwritten reminders to call her cousin in Lafayette. At the back of it was a note she had scribbled years ago the day the court settlement came through. Don't let money make you loud. Let it make you quiet. Let it buy you time. She smiled at the page. Ryan thought he kicked her out, but he had no idea he had just set her free. But freedom doesn't mean comfort. Not yet. And Evelyn still had some fires to walk through before she rose again. The first time Ryan placed a stack of papers in front of her, it was a Sunday. Evelyn was sitting at the kitchen table folding dish towels while the oven ticked away at a sweet potato pie. Her knees ached that day. Rain was coming. She could feel it in her bones, but she smiled through it. Ryan had stopped by without calling first, and even though she didn't like surprises, she told herself maybe he missed her. He walked in wearing one of those slim-fitted dress shirts that looked like it belonged to someone else's body. Natalie followed behind him, barely looked up from her phone. "Hey, Mama," he said, giving her a half-hug. "We brought some papers. Nothing serious, just stuff to help with taxes and the house. Cleaning things up on the back end, you know." Evelyn furrowed her brow. "What kind of papers?" Ryan pulled out a folder like a magician with a deck of cards. "Trust paperwork, real estate transfer, some power of attorney language. We had it reviewed. Natalie's firm does this kind of stuff all the time. Totally standard." Natalie chimed in from behind her screen, not looking up. "It's just a way to protect your assets, Miss Carter. Avoid probate. You'd still be covered for everything." "I didn't ask to avoid anything," Evelyn said quietly, her hands resting on the unfolded towel. Ryan chuckled. I know. That's why we're doing it for you. Look, if something happens to you, I mean God forbid, it would be a mess to untangle the house and your name on all the documents. This just makes sure things stay in the family." Evelyn stared at the paper. The letters swam a little. She didn't wear her reading glasses often. She hated how they pinched the sides of her nose. Ryan noticed. "Here," he said, handing her a pen. "I highlighted the signature lines. You don't need to worry about the rest. I already went over it with them." She hesitated. She wanted to say something like, "I should probably have someone look at this." Or "Why do you need power of attorney now?" But Ryan was her baby. Her little boy who used to cry when she walked past his crib. The one who needed an inhaler every time he got too excited. The one she stayed up with all night when he got chickenpox at 6 and refused to sleep without holding her hand. So she signed. Page after page. He even joked as she scribbled her name. "You're making history, Mama?" She laughed once, just a puff of air. The pie timer went off and she got up to turn the oven off. That moment stuck in her mind for weeks after. The smell of cinnamon and burnt sugar. The sound of the pen cap clicking shut. The smile on Natalie's face that felt just a little too satisfied. She didn't know it then, but that afternoon was the last time she would ever sit at that kitchen table. The next visits were shorter. Ryan started showing up with bank statements, and investor friends she didn't care to meet. He was always busy, always talking about flipping properties, building portfolios, how her home was equity waiting to be unlocked. He started calling her Evelyn in front of Natalie. That was new. And one day, while she was watering the begonias in the front yard, she overheard Natalie say, "Once we close on this place, we can finally get that apartment in Dallas." That's when Evelyn started packing a small bag just in case. She tucked away her Bible, her passport, the last photo she had of Leonard, and her notebook with the banking information for the settlement she had never told Ryan about. Her body didn't move as fast anymore. But her mind, it was still sharp enough to know when love had curdled. But Evelyn hadn't come this far just to watch everything she built disappear. Not without reminding Ryan whose name he had signed away. The day Ryan called her a guest in her own home, Evelyn didn't say a word. It was a Wednesday, sometime after lunch. She had just finished vacuuming the living room, a chore she still liked to do herself, even though her niece hated her for it. Dirt didn't care about age, and Evelyn believed in a clean house no matter who was watching. Ryan walked in, sunglasses still on, earbuds hanging around his neck. Natalie trailed behind mid-conversation with someone over Bluetooth. They didn't speak at first, just walked right past her like she was the cleaning lady. Then Ryan paused, turned around, and said casually, "Hey, next time you use the Dyson, can you empty it out? We've got people coming to see the place this weekend." Evelyn blinked. People. Realtors, just to get a feel for the value, market research. She stared at him. "You selling the house?" He chuckled like she had asked if he was moving to the moon. "Not yet. Just thinking ahead. Got to explore all our options, right?" She stood straight. "Our options." That's when he said it. "You're a guest now, Mama." "It's still your space, of course, but legally." "Well, you know how it is." Her hand tightened around the vacuum handle. She didn't say anything, didn't scream, didn't cry, just nodded once. That night, she packed her small bag for real. She didn't take much. Just what she needed. That Bible, her notebook, 2 dresses, 1 pair of sneakers, and her wedding band, which she hadn't worn since Leonard passed, but still kept in a little pouch by her bedside table. Ryan didn't ask where she was going. Natalie didn't care. They had what they wanted. Or so they thought. Evelyn checked into a budget motel on the other side of town near a truck stop and a gas station that always had flickering lights. The bed creaked when she sat down and the heater wheezed like it had asthma, but it was hers and it was quiet. She sat at the tiny desk and opened her notebook. There was a number she had kept in there for 14 years. Belonged to a woman named Doris who used to work at a nonprofit that helped older women navigate housing law. Doris had helped her once when a tenant in her rental property tried to sue her over a plumbing issue. She dialed the number. It rang once, then twice, disconnected. She sighed. Then she remembered CJ, Clarence C.J. Burrell, Leonard's friend from the old neighborhood, a lawyer, long retired, but sharper than a whip and twice as stubborn. She hadn't spoken to him in years, but she picked up the phone anyway. It rang 6 times before a tired, raspy voice answered. "This better be Jesus or trouble." Evelyn smiled. "Maybe it's both." "Evie." "Yeah, it's me. I need to talk to you." But CJ didn't need much convincing because real friends remember when someone shows up with a casserole after your surgery, and he had been waiting for a call like this. CJ met her at a diner just off Interstate 20 the next morning, the kind of place that still served coffee in heavy ceramic mugs and called everyone Han, whether they were 5 or 85. He looked older than she remembered, white in his beard now, eyes a little glassier. But he still had that same thick brow and dry humor that made people think twice before lying to his face. "You look like hell," he said, sliding into the booth across from her. Evelyn smiled. "Good morning to you, too." He took a sip of his coffee. Black, no sugar, no cream, just like Leonard used to. "All right," CJ said, setting the cup down. "Tell me everything. Don't skip. Don't soften. Just lay it out." So she did. She told him about the forms Ryan made her sign, the way he changed the locks, the guest comment, Natalie, the realtors, the fake smiles. CJ listened without interrupting once. When she was done, he leaned back and let out a long sigh. He tricked you, played you, but he made one big mistake. "What's that?" He forgot who raised him. Evelyn looked down at her napkin. "I signed the deed over, CJ. "Yeah, but signing under false pretense. That doesn't mean it's legal, especially if you weren't fully informed or he misrepresented the documents." She raised an eyebrow. "You think we can take him to court?" CJ grinned. "Evie, I could take him to court in my sleep." She laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. "I'm tired, CJ. I'm not trying to destroy him. I just want my home, and I want to look at myself again and not feel like a damn fool." CJ nodded slowly. "Then let's not destroy him. Let's teach him something." They spent the next 2 hours going over everything. What she signed, what dates she remembered, the conversations she could recall. Evelyn had written most of it down in her notebook anyway, even before she thought she would need it. Habit of an old nurse. Document everything. CJ told her what to expect next, what kind of lawyer he would connect her with, how they would file a petition to investigate whether the transfer was fraudulent, and what to do if it escalated to court. Then Evelyn said something she hadn't told anyone else. "I've got money, CJ." He blinked. "You mean a little saved up?" "No, I mean real money. Settlement money from the hospital. 9.5 million. CJ nearly dropped his mug. Jesus. I never touched it. Didn't want Ryan knowing. Didn't want anyone knowing, really. CJ shook his head slowly. You've been sitting on $9 million and letting this boy run circles around you. I didn't want money to change the way I loved him, she said barely above a whisper. CJ didn't answer right away, just stared at her, then reached across the table and touched her hand. It didn't, he said. He changed all on his own. Evelyn looked out the window at the highway in the distance. Her reflection in the glass looked older than she felt. Worn, not defeated, but cracked, like something that had been dropped, but refused to break. She turned back to CJ. I want to do this right. No drama, no cameras, just my name back on my door. CJ nodded. We'll get it. But there was one last conversation Evelyn needed to have before the lawyers, before the hearings. One final attempt to speak not to the man Ryan had become, but the boy she remembered. Evelyn didn't call first. She knew if she did, he would either hang up or have Natalie talk for him. So, she just showed up. It was late afternoon when she pulled into the driveway. The yard looked too neat, like someone had trimmed the hedges just enough to impress a stranger, but not enough to show real care. Her begonias were gone. She knocked once. Ryan answered in gym shorts and a branded hoodie holding a protein shake. His face tightened the second he saw her. Ma. Evelyn, what are you doing here? Evelyn stepped forward just enough that the screen door separated them. I don't need much of your time. I just came to say something. He looked back over his shoulder, probably checking if Natalie was home, then sighed and stepped onto the porch. Look, if this is about the house. She raised a hand. Let me finish. He shut his mouth. I raised you when nobody else would, not because I had to, and not because I wanted to thank you. I did it because I saw a child who needed love, and I gave it every ounce I had. Ryan's eyes flickered, but he stayed quiet. I watched you grow. I gave up vacations, sleep, time, my body. I gave it all to you. And I never once made you feel like a guest in this life. She took a breath. Her throat was tight. And you repaid me with a signature and a changed lock. He rubbed the back of his neck. You signed Ma. It wasn't like I forced. Don't call me Ma if you don't mean it. Silence. She straightened her shoulders. I'm not here to argue. Just to tell you I know what you did. And you should know I'm not broke. Never was. I've got enough money to buy this house 10 times over. Ryan's face changed. First disbelief, then panic, then something like shame. I didn't know that. You weren't supposed to, she said. Because love ain't a business, and loyalty can't be bought. But now I know, and so do you. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. I've already spoken to a lawyer. This will go where it needs to go. I just wanted to look you in the eye one last time before it does. Ryan's hand dropped to his side. You're going to sue me? No, she said. I'm going to remind you what a real home costs. And with that, she turned and walked back to her car. No yelling, no begging, just a woman who finally remembered her worth. But lawsuits don't scare people like Evelyn. What scares them is seeing the person they underestimated rise stronger than ever. 3 months later, the house was empty. No furniture, no Natalie, no Ryan. The new owner, a retired school teacher from Lafayette, said the place felt heavy when she first walked in, like it had been through something, and it had. CJ had moved fast. The fraud petition passed through the court quicker than expected. The judge didn't even blink after reviewing the documents and testimony. Said Evelyn had clearly been misled, and the transfer was under questionable, possibly manipulative circumstances. Ryan never showed up to the hearing. He had already left the state. Natalie went back to Dallas without him. Evelyn didn't smile when she heard that. She didn't laugh. She just exhaled. Long, slow, like something had been holding its breath inside her, and it could finally let go. She didn't move back in, though. Too many memories. Too many ghosts of quiet betrayals and Sunday dinners that now felt like rehearsals for an exit. Instead, she took her money, her full, untouched inheritance, and did something no one expected. She bought 3 homes in Pascagoula, Mississippi. Not big ones, not flashy, just enough. She turned them into safe housing for women over 60 who had been evicted, displaced, or abandoned by their families. She named the little program Len's place after her late husband. Said it was the kind of thing he would have done if he had lived long enough to retire. The first resident was a woman named Alma, 74 years old, kicked out by her grandson when she couldn't babysit full-time anymore. The second was Darlene. Her own daughter sold her house while she was in rehab for a hip surgery. Evelyn cooked Sunday meals for them all. Sometimes they watched game shows. Sometimes they just sat on the porch and swapped stories about who hurt them and who they survived. Anyway, Evelyn never needed to explain her story. They saw it in the way she carried herself. Calm, steady, unapologetic. CJ still visited now and then, especially when paperwork piled up. He joked about putting her on a billboard. Woman who turned betrayal into a blueprint. Evelyn would laugh and wave him off. I just did what my mama taught me. You don't fold when you're cornered. You pray, you plant your feet, and you protect your peace. But Evelyn knew the fight wasn't about a house. It was about not letting a single act of betrayal define the life she built with her bare hands. 1 year later, Evelyn sat on the back porch of Len's place with a cup of tea and a fleece blanket over her lap. The sky above Pascagoula was streaked with orange and gold, the kind of sunset that made silence feel like a hymn. Alma was upstairs crocheting. Darlene was in the kitchen humming to herself while she cleaned collard greens. And Evelyn, for the first time in a long while, felt still. Not busy, not angry, not hurt, just still. A letter came in the mail that morning. No return address, just her name written in handwriting she hadn't seen in almost a year. Inside was a note. I messed up. I see that now. I don't know why I did it the way I did. Maybe I thought I was owed something. Maybe I just never understood what you gave me. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted to say it. You didn't deserve what I did. I hope you're okay. Ryan. Evelyn read it twice, then she folded it neatly and placed it in the back of her Bible. Not because she planned to forget, but because some things are meant to be remembered without being relived. She didn't write him back. She didn't need to. Forgiveness to her wasn't about letting him off the hook. It was about freeing herself from the grip of what he had done. She knew something now that she hadn't known then. You can love someone fully, raise them right, give them your everything, and still lose them. Not because of who you were, but because of who they chose to be. And that's not your shame to carry. Evelyn leaned back in her chair as the crickets began to tune up their evening song. She closed her eyes and breathed deep, the kind of breath that fills more than lungs. It filled memory. It filled meaning. A home wasn't just a roof. It was the people under it. And she had built a new one from scratch. No paperwork needed. If this story hit you somewhere deep, if it reminded you of someone you've lost, loved, or let go, share it with a friend who needs to hear it. And remember this, real love can't be stolen. Real mothers don't fold. And real power doesn't scream. It builds again quietly from the ground up.